He knew well enough that the spirit of the stone circle was surely a demon, and very likely an oracle as well. A demon with no shape, only a kind of unformed sexual glare with the eyes of prophecy. He wondered briefly if it might not be the soul of Sylvia Pittston, the giant woman whose religious huckstering had led to the final showdown in Tull. But no, not her. The stones in the circle were ancient. Sylvia Pittston was a jilly-come-lately compared to the thing that made its den here. It was old and sly, but the gunslinger knew the forms of speaking quite well and did not think the boy would have to use the jawbone mojo. The voice and mind of the oracle would be more than occupied with him. The gunslinger needed to know things in spite of the risk, and the risk was high. Yet for both Jake and himself, he needed desperately to know. The gunslinger opened his tobacco poke and pawed through it, pushing the dry strands of leaf aside until he came to a minuscule object wrapped in a fragment of white paper. He rolled it between fingers that would all too soon be gone and looked absently up at the sky. Then he unwrapped it and held the contents, a tiny white pill with edges that had been much worn with traveling, in his hand. Jake looked at it curiously. "What's that?" The gunslinger uttered a short laugh. The story Court used to tell us was that the old gods pissed over the desert and made mescaline. Jake only looked puzzled. "This is a drug," the gunslinger said, "but not one that puts you to sleep. One that wakes you up all the way for a little while." "Like LSD," the boy agreed instantly and then looked puzzled. "What's that?" "I don't know," Jake said. "It just popped out. I think it came from, before." The gunslinger nodded, but he was doubtful. He had never heard of mescaline referred to as LSD, not even in Martin's old books. "Will it hurt you?" Jake asked. "It never has," the gunslinger said, conscious of the evasion. "I don't like it." "Never mind." The gunslinger squatted in front of the waterskin, took a mouthful, and swallowed the pill. As always, he felt an immediate reaction in his mouth. It seemed overloaded with saliva. He sat down before the dead fire. "When does something happen to you?" Jake asked. "Not for a little while. Be quiet." So Jake was quiet, watching with open suspicion as the gunslinger went calmly about the ritual of cleaning his guns. He reholstered them and said, "Your shirt, Jake. Take it off and give it to me." Jake pulled his faded shirt reluctantly over his head, revealing the skinny stack of his ribs, and gave it to Roland. The gunslinger produced a needle that had been threaded into the side seam of his jeans and thread from an empty cartridge loop in his gun belt. He began to sew up a long rip in one of the sleeves of the boy's shirt. As he finished and handed the shirt back, he felt the mask beginning to take hold. There was a tightening in his stomach and a feeling that all the muscles in his body were being cranked up a notch. "I have to go," he said, getting up. "It's time." The boy half rose, his face a shadow of concern, and then he settled back. "Be careful," he said. "Please." "Remember the jawbone," the gunslinger said. He put his hand on Jake's head as he went by and tousled the corn-colored hair. The gesture startled him into a short laugh. Jake watched after him with a troubled smile until he was gone into the willow jungle. The gunslinger walked deliberately toward the circle of stones, pausing long enough to get a cool drink from the spring. He could see his own reflection in a tiny pool edged with moss and lily pads, and he looked at himself for a moment, as fascinated as Narcissus. The mind reaction was beginning to settle in, slowing down his chain of thought by seeming to increase the connotations of every idea and every bit of sensory input. Things began to take on weight and thickness that had been heretofore invisible. He paused, getting to his feet again, and looked through the tangled snarl of willows. Sunlight slanted through in a golden, dusty barn. He watched the interplay of motes and tiny flying things for a bit before going on. The drug had often disturbed him. His ego was too strong, or perhaps just too simple, to enjoy being eclipsed and peeled back, made a target for more sensitive emotions. They tickled at him and sometimes maddened him. Like the touch of a cat's whiskers, but this time he felt fairly calm. That was good. He stepped into the clearing and walked straight into the circle. He stood, letting his mind run free, yet it was coming harder now, faster. The grass screamed green at him. It seemed that if he bent over and rubbed his hands in it, he would stand up with green paint all over his fingers and palms. He resisted a puckish urge to try the experiment. But there was no voice from the oracle, no stirring, sexual or otherwise. He went to the altar, stood beside it for a moment. Coherent thought was now almost impossible. His teeth felt strange in his head, tiny tombstones set in pink, moist earth. The world held too much light. He climbed up on the altar and lay back. His mind was becoming a jungle full of strange thought plants that he had never seen or suspected before. A willow jungle that had grown up around a mescaline spring. The sky was water and he hung suspended over it. The thought gave him a vertigo that seemed far away and unimportant. A line of old poetry occurred to him. Not a nursery voice now, no. His mother had feared the drugs and the necessity of them as she had feared court and the need for this beater of boys. This verse came from the Mani folk to the north of the desert, a clan of them still living among machines that usually didn't work, and which sometimes ate the men when they did. The lines played again and again, reminding him in an unconnected way that was typical of the mescaline rush of snow falling in a globe he had owned as a child, mystic and half fantastical. Beyond the reach of human range, a drop of hell, a touch of strange. The trees which overhung the altar contained faces. He watched them with abstracted fascination. Here was a dragon, green and twitching. Here a wood nymph with beckoning branch arms. Here a living skull overgrown with slime. Faces, faces. The grasses of the clearing suddenly whipped and bent. I come, I come. Vague stirrings in his flesh. How far I have come, he thought, from lying with Susan in sweet grass. On the drop to this. She pressed over him, a body made of the wind, a breast of fragrant jasmine, rose, and honeysuckle. Make your prophecy, he said. Tell me what I need to know. His mouth felt full of metal, a sigh, a faint sound of weeping. The gunslinger's genitals felt drawn and hard over him, and beyond the faces and the leaves he could see the mountains, hard and brutal and full of teeth. The body moved against him, struggled with him. He felt his hands curl into fists. She had sent him a vision of Susan. It was Susan above him, lovely Susan Delgado waiting for him in an abandoned drover's hut on the drop with her hair spilled down her back and over her shoulders. He tossed his head, but her face followed. Jasmine, rose, honeysuckle, old hay, the smell of love. Love me. Speak prophecy, he said. Speak truth. Please, the oracle wept. Don't be cold. It's always so cold here. Hands slipping over his flesh, manipulating, lighting him on fire, pulling him, drawing a perfumed black crevice, wet and warm. No, dry, cold, sterile. Have a touch of mercy, gunslinger. Ah, please, I cry your favor, mercy. Would you have mercy on the boy? What boy? I know no boy. It's not boys I need. Oh, please. Jasmine, rose, honeysuckle, dry hay with its ghost of summer clover, oil decanted from ancient urns, a riot for flesh. After, he said, if what you tell me is useful, now, please, now. He let his mind coil out at her, the antithesis of emotion. The body that hung over him froze and seemed to scream. There was a brief, vicious tug-of-war between his temples. His mind was the rope, gray and fibrous. For long moments, there was no sound but the quiet hush of his breathing and the faint breeze which made the green faces in the trees shift, wink, and grimace. No bird sang. Her hold loosened. Again there was the sound of sobbing. It would have to be quick, or she would leave him. To stay now meant attenuation, perhaps her own kind of death. Already he felt her chilling, drawing away to leave the circle of stones. Wind rippled the grass in tortured patterns. Prophecy, he said, and then an even bleaker noun, truth. A weeping, tired sigh. He could almost have granted the mercy she begged, but there was Jake. He would have found Jake dead or insane if he had been any later last night. Sleep then. No. Then half sleep. What she asked was dangerous, but also probably necessary. The gunslinger turned his eyes up to the faces in the leaves. A play was being enacted there for his amusement. Worlds rose and fell before him. Empires were built across shining sands where forever machines toiled in abstract electronic frenzies. Empires declined, fell, rose again. Wheels that had spun like silent liquid moved more slowly, began to squeak, began to scream, stopped. Sand choked the stainless steel gutters of concentric streets below, dark skies full of stars like beds of cold jewels, and through it all a dying wind of change blew, bringing with it the cinnamon smell of late October. The gunslinger watched as the world moved on and half slept. 3. This is the number of your fate. 3. Yes, 3 is mystic. 3 stands at the heart of your quest. Another number comes later. Now the number is 3. Which 3? We see in part, and thus is the mirror of prophecy darkened. Tell me what you can. The first is young, dark-haired. He stands on the brink of robbery and murder. A demon has infested him. The name of the demon is Heroin. Which demon is that? I know it not, even from my tutor's lessons. We see in part, and thus is the mirror of prophecy darkened. There are other worlds, gunslinger, and other demons. These waters are deep. Watch for the doorways. Watch for the roses and the unfound doorways. The second, she comes on wheels. I see no more. The third, death, but not for you. The man in black, where is he? Near. You will speak with him soon. Of what will we speak? The tower. The boy? Jake? Tell me of the boy. The boy is your gate to the man in black. The man in black is your gate to the 3. The 3 are your way to the dark tower. How? How can that be? Why must it be? We see in part, and thus in the mirror. God damn you. No, God damn me. Don't patronize me, thing. What shall I call you then? Star slut? Whore of the winds? Some live on love that comes to the ancient places, even in these sad and evil times. Some, gunslinger, live on blood, even I understand, on the blood of young boys. May he not be spared? Yes. How? Cease, gunslinger. Strike your camp and turn back northwest. In the northwest there is still a need for men who live by the bullet. I am sworn by my father's guns and by the treachery of Martin. Martin is no more. The man in black has eaten his soul. This you know. I am sworn. Then you are damned. Have your way with me, bitch.